Everyone, and thank you, Dan. Happy New Year. Let's see, any changes to the agenda? If not, I'd welcome a motion to approve the agenda.
Mr. Chair, move we approve the agenda as presented.
All right, second. All right, good enough for me. Let's move on. First up is the minutes from November 13th. Did folks have a chance to look at those minutes?
Actually, Greg, but before we jump into that, could we do just a quick round of introductions? Just
Oh yeah,
and actually, yeah, just because we've got the usual folks, but we've also got Laura Crawford, agency financial specialist here. So maybe we'll just go around the room here. So Lynn, we'll start with you.
Good morning, all. Lynn Harding, Financial Services Manager. Good to see y'all. Happy New Year.
morning, Lynn.
Good morning, Laura Crawford, Financial Specialist for ORCAA.
Good to see you again, Laura.
Jim Cooper, ORCAA Board.
And Jeff Johnston, Executive Director at ORCAA.
All right,
Debbie Moody, Office Manager.
that's the room. Dan, you want to say hi?
And Dan Nelson, Communications Manager and Zoom Master.
All right, Randy.
Randy Netherland, Mason County.
And Greg Brotherton, Vice Chair of ORCAA, Chair of this, and Jefferson County Commissioner. I will note that our minutes note that we did introduce everyone on in the November meeting as well. But I think it's a great policy, and that's until we get familiar with everyone. So good to see you guys. I am curious about the Zoom, the owl camera. Is there a reason you guys have it turned off so we can't see the whole room at the top border? Is that a choice, or is I'm just curious?
Let me see what I can do. Sometimes the pan. So let me.
Oh, you're on now.
Yeah. So but there's a panorama setting. So let me see if I can. I know sometimes that gets distracting, but let me. My phone is working to connect to Mr. Owl, Pano View.
No problem. Oh, yeah, there it is.
There. Okay, so let's, yeah, so you can try that.
Okay, great. Just so we can, yeah, get the lay of the land.
Yeah.
All right. Now, shall we consider the minutes from November 13th?
Move approval, Mr. Chair.
Second.
All right, it's been moved and seconded. All in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. All right, minutes have been approved. Thank you, Debbie, for putting those together. Onward to back to my agenda. Oh yes, the second quarter update. I'll saw in the general meeting too that I'll be giving a report on this. So Lynn, you know, as Randy says, make it simple for me.
Oh, I missed that part. I'll try. So great to have you all here. We are covering the second quarter of fiscal year 2025. And
Hey, Dan, sorry, Lynn. Hey, Dan, will you pull up the budget, please?
any way to make it a little.
Yeah, he's working on it.
I can't see no matter how big it gets.
You have a copy?
Oh,
Yeah.
can y'all see?
Yep.
Oh, good. All right. So as I was saying, we are in the second quarter of our fiscal year 2025 budget, ending December 31, 2024. It's always good to report, when you're talking about finances. And as you all recall, we have, the board approved a little over $3 million budget back in June. And 6 months into the year, we have collected a little over half of our revenue, 52%. And just to highlight a couple of those lines for you. For instance, the NOC major, second line, minor and major, we budgeted 160,000. We're at about 43%. And you know, this is a fluctuating program. This is based on projections, historical data, you know, our economy, how things are going in our 6-county region. And staff have definitely been aggressively working on a number of permits that are coming in. A lot of them are smaller ones this year. But again, it's hard to know what to expect the remaining 6 months out of the year. But in past, we have met or hardly exceeded what our budget amounts have been, especially in the last few years. The assessments line, about the 6th line down, we budgeted 557,000. Of course, that's an annual invoice that is mailed to all of our municipalities. in our 6 county region. Those bills go out in January. We start collecting them in January and up until about March. March is when we typically receive our last receipt on those assessments. So the municipalities are great about responding to those invoices and paying very efficiently. And timing of our quarterly grants, as you all know, I shared with you, we have a number of grants here that ORCAA administers, the wood stove education and enforcement, the wood smoke reduction, the ecology PM 2.5, the EPA Chica Peak, the core federal and state, the FSEC, and soon to be the IRA, but we'll get into that. So those grants are all submitted to ecology or abstract funding sources on a quarterly basis, and we return the receipts in the next quarter. So for the October, November, December quarterly billing, we will typically get the reimbursements from those sources, ecology, FSEC, in January or February. So that's when you'll see those. And that's due to the fact that we are in a cash basis of accounting where you recognize the revenues when they are received and the expenditures when they're paid. Questions so far?
Could you repeat that last, you broke up for a second for me. Could you repeat the last thing you said?
Yes, so we are on a cash basis of accounting. And so what that means is we recognize revenues when they are received, expenditures when we expend.
Right, okay, thanks. That's what I thought you said.
Yes.
Thank you.
Oh, thank you for asking those important questions.
And one other question, the Title V dollars that are, kind of pushing us to that 50% revenue obtained so far, those are also, they're not going to go over 100% either, right? We just get that kind of front loaded. It's the same way we get the assessments kind of middle loaded.
That would be unusual for us to exceed 100% of Title V. Good
Great.
question. The 11 sources that round up the Title V program, most of them, 10 of them pay us on a quarterly basis. One of them pays us upfront. So, and they have a choice of doing so. They can electively choose a payment of a single invoice or pay it over time, over 4 quarters.
Do we give a discount if organizations pay ahead of time? No?
Not right now, we don't, but,
Oh, okay.
so, good question. Continuing on with the revenue, let's see, the other line item I wanted to indicate is the miscellaneous revenue. We had budgeted 10,000. We have received about $1,200 in that line. And that basically includes our credit card rebate that we received from US Bank. We also received a wellness mini grant of $95. And the 10,000 includes the sale of 1 or maybe 2 of our vehicles. So that's yet to be determined during the 6 months of the year. That depends on actually how soon we look at purchasing a new vehicle, and we usually tie that in with selling one at the same time. So right now we have received 1.5 million or 52% of our $3 million plus budget. That's a good place to be in comparison to last year, we were slightly more. So again, another good good comparison. Of the 1.5 million, the majority of that, of course, includes fees. So to the right of that, there's that little chart where there's a summary of the revenue and reflecting the fees at 69%, grants at 19%, penalties at 6%, and 5% for other. And typically where we lay at the end of each year for fees, it's typically 60% of our budget. We combine the fees to include assessments also. But we break it out for you. And then in terms of our grants that we received that I previously identified, that's also split almost down the middle between Fed and state. Any questions on the revenue before we move to expenditure? Anything you'd like to add there? Lauren, anything you'd like to add? All right, moving on to expenditures. Thanks for navigating, Dan Nelson. So the first major component of our expenditure, as you well know, is our salaries and benefits. And we budgeted right under 2.8 million. We're about 47% expenditures in those line items. Not to be, it's not unusual. We are down a couple positions right now. And, so we will likely stay at a lower than budgeted amount through the end of the year. In the meantime, the employee benefits, the higher amounts take place in the latter 6 months of the year because of our benefits are based on a calendar year, not a fiscal year. So we are where we should be. Good position to be in because that rounding up about 85% of our budget 6 months into the year.
How did our rates come out? Hoping for, but
Within budget. So good question, Jim. So we always include a net amount for our benefits that include your medical, your dental, your vision, your PERS retirement. All those affect our budget. And so when you forecast that, work with your AWC benefit trust, stay on top of the actuarial committee that determines what our PERS rates are gonna be. Interesting enough, I received an email indicating that the PERS fund is extremely healthy right now. The state pension is at 96% fully funded for all of the retirement funds. This is one of the healthiest pension funds in the nation. We're like listed as one of the top 5. Washington is a good place to live. Just don't tell your friends we have enough people here, right? So really, it's pretty amazing. The Office of the State Actuary calculates all these funding statuses and where we stand, and so it's important to stay on top of it. So we are also budgeting accordingly, because you never know what's gonna happen, right? Things change, the nation changes, presidents change, so we'll see where we're gonna go from here. But right now, our public pension is in a comfort and secure position. So kudos to DRS and the actuarial committee. Moving on to non-payroll expenditures, we all know what that is, our supplies, our public education needs and training and professional services, and we also included a purchase of a EV vehicle, an EV charging station. There's a lot going on in the non-payroll area. However, we're slightly under budget. We haven't purchased a vehicle. We haven't installed a EV charger. I know Jeff will be updating you later on those 2 components. But Randy, I just want to pull your attention, and the rest of y'all, not just Randy, but our Endurance premium, annual premium that's paid to Endurance every year. There was concern, do we have enough sufficient budget authority allocated to that annual premium? And I did look into it, and we did have ample. We are slightly over by $600 on that annual premium. I did budget around 10%. That was a safe forecast after further discussions with Endurance. And then, of course, in the next FFM that comes on board will be doing the same thing. I have high hopes they'll be in conversation with Endurance to find out, what their prediction is too. So working closely with them, and communication's a big item there. So we budgeted $359,000 in non-payroll. We've spent about 36%. We'll see where we go from there. We do anticipate a vehicle purchase. Well, again, we'll see where that goes. Moving on to building operations. Yay, the building's paid off, so we continue to maintain the building with a number of different contractors, from HVAC, from S, and our janitorial. We budgeted $104,000. We're at 22% expense. However, that gives us more flexibility with this new maintenance position that we'll talk about later as well, to maybe help increase that, so we can move on some of the projects short term and look at some of the longer term projects. For the program operations, that the largest one there will be your wood smoke reduction program, the program that Nelson, communication manager, manages. He definitely works diligently with a lot of our HVAC vendors, and has definitely been producing a number of requests to the finance department. So we have actually exceeded our 50% which is okay, we can do that. We're at 56% of expenses under that program. The good thing is the colleges let us know if we need money, they have it. At this point, we don't feel we're gonna need the money, but it's nice to know that there is money there if we find out we need to request additional funds. We budgeted $173,000 for the overall program operations of the agency. It also includes our Chica Peak Observatory that Odell Hadley oversees. And we are slightly under budget for Chica Peak. That's okay. There's 6 months left for supplies and minor maintenance of that particular site. We also had some activity with our tenants. So this is basically an in and out. We received our security deposits when tenants move in. And if they leave the premises in reasonable condition, normal wear and tear is expected, they get their security deposit back. And in most cases, our tenants get a return security deposit. Very rare where we withhold because we've got very responsible tenants. So that's always a good thing. We had a little bit of activity in the last couple months, so we did pay out of almost $2,300 in refundable security and key deposits. So we're hoping to, I'll get more into it with the one tenant vacancy that we do have. So we're at where we should be about 50% average in that line item. We budgeted 173. We expended about 85. We're about where we were last year too, slightly under from last year. So with our expenditures projected 3.4 million, we have expended about 45% of our expenses approved by the board. And as you well know, and we'll get into page 2 on that, the difference between the revenue of 3,015,000 and expenditures of 3.4 was the use of our contingency fund of 14. And we'll get into that on page 2 in the fund balance. And like Mr. Jeff would like to add something.
Great, thanks, Lynn. I just had one thing to add in terms of the program operations, the Holy Map project that you see in there. So again, that's last fiscal year, and this we funded Holy Map, which is a Olympia nonprofit that provides services in a couple of the big homeless camps here in Olympia. And again, we work with them as there are issues with outdoor burning and we get complaints. They're essentially our connection on the ground. We reached out to them early in the fiscal year about trying to get things in the works to spend to work that $8,000. Haven't heard anything back from them in several months, so I need to follow up with Ty and Quinn to get moving on that because again, but it is kind of in their report to reach out to us to figure out how we're going to get those funds to them and what kind of work that will support.
So on that, do they just handle how the stuff is burned? What exactly are they doing? Are they doing any cleanup themselves?
Yes, they're doing, so I'm going to put this, actually, Dan, if you could quit sharing for just a moment, just so we can see each other on the screen. So yes, they do. They coordinate. I mean, they've got funding through the Thurston Regional Housing Council, and so they do cleanups. And in fact, the city did a big cleanup of the site called the Jungle, which is where we've had the most of the issues. And so yes, a big part of what they do is cleanup and coordinating cleanup. You might remember, so back.
They use a contractor.
They use a contractor, yes. They don't clean it up themselves, but near the end of our last fiscal year, Ty and Quinn from Only Map came and gave a report to the board and a presentation and showed some before and after pictures of some of the cleanups that they've been doing.
And that's what I thought, and I did see some of the cleanups firsthand as I was out there. And this may not even be the time to say it, but I just want to throw it out there for consideration for people to consider that know this part of what we're talking about. This may be an avenue that we can spread out through the other counties to be able to have them contribute to maybe a fund that would go to doing some of this type of cleanup in the other areas. I know I'm just saying for myself, the tightwad that I am, I know that I would support something like that. And so I just thought I'd throw that out there for your consideration for future talks.
I mean,
Sure, yeah, no, I'm sorry, what was that, Greg?
I just wanted to amplify what Randy was saying, and that it's a problem that we know is growing everywhere. So it's not going away, and many hands make light work. So something to consider.
Yeah,
Copy
I guess
copy and paste is the word of the day.
what I would add there is just that, of course, this is a big societal issue. ORCAA's tie into it is clean air issues, and so where we're specifically focused on is areas where we're getting complaints either from businesses or residents and so how can we go in and reduce the amount of burning that's causing air quality issues? And so, but certainly anywhere in our 6 counties where we know we're getting complaints or where ORCAA can be part of the conversation about helping to address this issue, happy to be part of those conversations. Okay, great. So Dan, why don't you pull the budget back up. And Lynn, I think back to you.
Mhm. All right. Thanks, Dan. So on page 2 of our budget, this is a reflection of our checking account that Thurston County Treasurer's Office graciously monitors for us and invests for us. As you can see, our beginning balance in our checking account with Thurston County Treasurers is about 4.6 million on July 1, 2024. We all know that was a large result of a large penalty that received at the end of our fiscal year, 2024. We have received 1.5 million in revenue that we briefly just discussed. We have expended a little over 1.5 million. We are holding about 6,500 in payroll taxes to be paid. That includes our walk cares, our paid family medical leave, and our L&I. Now, that is being paid this month in January, so you'll see a crusade there. And we pay those payables for payroll taxes. You're all familiar with our fund balance allocations. These are contingency funds and capital funds that the board established previous years by resolution. Those amount to 1,225,425. So those are basically committed funds, assigned fund, restricted funds. These are all the allocations, the funds that you can see there on the left-hand side. We have unrestricted fund balance of $3.3 million. Again, this is as of December 31, 2024. So the combined sum of those two fund balance allocations for contingency and capital, 1.2 million, and our unrestricted 3.3, that equals the $4.6 million that Thurston County Treasurers is holding in our account. Questions from anyone?
I have one question, Lynn. So looking back to our revenue, you don't have to go back there, Dan, but investment income is a little below expectations, and I assume that we have it mostly through the Thurston County Treasurer's Office and LGIP, the state investment pool, and I just want to note that our Jefferson County at least is starting to see actually higher returns and CDs a little bit if we look a little farther afield. And I'm just wondering, what is our investment plan? Do we kind of defer that to the Thurston County Treasurer, or what's our ongoing plan? Can you remind me?
Yes, excellent question, Greg. So by the time we published our second quarter fiscal year 2025 financial report, the Thurston County Treasurer's Office was unable to provide us with December earnings, which I'm estimating probably to be about $10,000 to $11,000, consistent with previous. 100% of our funds are invested with the LGIP, and we're right under 3%. I think we were 2.73% in November, and they are obviously investing 100% of our funds. We have full liquidity if we need to access our funds. These are not part of the state investment pool. Separate. Thurston County has their own investment committee, and it includes our Thurston County Treasurer and a number of other department managers at the county level. And they do an amazing job with our investments. Nicole, unfortunately, she just moved on up there, but confident that they'll be filling her position with someone just as capable. But we looked into pulling out some of those surplus funds, unrestricted funds, into a separate account, say with a local bank making a higher interest rate. And Thurston County frowns upon that. We have to formally request request the Thurston County treasurers to be able to do that, but you have to have reasons for doing that too. The reasons that we communicated with them wasn't within their exception rule to pull out money and place in a separate account. One of the reasons is if departments and agencies were allowed to do that, that would make investing at the Thurston County level very difficult to manage and get us an expected higher return. Does that help answer the question?
Suggesting pulling it out, but so are you saying the Thurston County only does LGIP, or if they diversify, do we just have a percentage of that and we would follow their investment strategy?
We follow the investment strategy too, and we are commingled with all the other funds. People dissect out by department, by agency, what your average daily fund balance is and what you're making on a daily basis, how it's invested. And, but it is 100% LGIP.
But so either last year or the year before, we talked about like whether we could invest, you alluded to that, like in places, and they didn't like the idea. But I don't remember getting back the information about what statutory authority they actually have over our finances. Because they don't, like, I don't think we're required to bank with them like the school.
We have a
boards,
choice.
right?
We have to choose someone within our sixth
Right.
county, and typically.
But it doesn't have to be a
we're-
government.
No, I think it does.
Oh, it does.
It
It's
has
in our
to be a
RCW.
county government.
It has to be
Okay.
within your sixth, or within
Okay.
our jurisdiction, and typically it's with the governing body or where your main office is.
Okay.
Is typically where you rest your.
Thank you. Because I think I just remember that I don't think we had seen the
RCW.
policy around that.
Yeah.
We asked for. So can we just get the board so we all understand that?
Sure,
It's a
yeah,
little different than city or a county.
sure. There's it's in the State Clean Air Act about, again, as it's specifying the local air authorities and how, so yes, I will provide that RCW.
Well, and if we didn't use them, we probably couldn't use the state pool for our investment, which is as secure as it gets.
No, but we could shop around with all 6 of you.
Oh, with all 6 of us?
Yeah, that's what I hear.
Well, no, I was gonna say, my brother, then the problem you come in is which one wants it. Now, that's a whole nother animal. Which one wants to take it? We're talking Thurston
Well,
County,
I'm
right?
just
Thank you,
really
Thurston
mostly-
County.
No, I'm really mostly asking about it because I want to know about that,
And that's
like
true. It's a
the
good-
under the next level down about.
Interesting enough though, too, is
Decision.
that, say Northwest Clean Air Agency in Vancouver, Skagit County, they use the Skagit County auditor, treasurer.
Mhm.
Now, Skagit County does not have a local government investment pool. They invest with the state. So it depends on also your county auditor, treasurer. Where have they decided to choose their banker? How's that?
Right.
So, the layers, so that's also an interesting concept too. It depends on what your local treasurer chooses at their RCW level that is different than us. So,
Yeah, and so for me, I think the particular question is whether they actually have the authority around investment decisions versus banking decisions
yeah, what I do know.
for this board.
Yeah, what I do know is that because we have all of our funds at the Thurston County Treasurer, they have the control of how they invest. Only in legal, obviously, investments, and there is a committee that formulates too and complies with their requirements. So there's the layers that sometimes you really have to walk it.
Well, and we found, and I know it's different for every kind of government, but like there's different rules around investment versus banking. Like they're 2 different financial products.
But now usually even that investment that you're talking about, doesn't your city already put it through the county treasurer as well?
No,
Not at all? Okay, because some do.
no, we use we have some funds in the state pool or whatever it's, I don't remember what the exact name of that, but we use a government broker. And we actually invest in, just starting last year or the year before, we started investing in private notes, and we made a whole bunch of money last year because we dumped money into corporation bonds that we hadn't been able to do before. And that was as secure as what we were doing before, but it was something that hadn't been allowed by city policy and has only been allowed by state policy for maybe 5 or 6 years. And so that's what I'm looking for, is our ability to like be in control of our own destiny. And I don't like other people holding the strings, even if they do a good job. And I have a lot of respect for our county treasurer.
Well, it's funny because I don't disagree with you. I wish, for example, our treasurer would invest in counties instead of our counties buying our lease, getting things and going out and paying interest. We could be loaning it to ourselves, which is the bank for everybody. But here's the thing: a county cannot, because it's the arm of the state, it cannot bankrupt. A county cannot bankrupt. They always have to pay. There's no way around it. A city, municipal corporation can. We cannot. So we're the safest, but our treasurer would never dream of investing in us and taking the full amount. That's just.
Yeah, I'm actually having that conversation with 2 county treasurers right now about affordable housing, because some of these bigger counties are sitting on billions of dollars every single day. Like 30% investment in local housing projects would pay off every day. So, but that's now we're on a tangent. Thank you for the policy.
Back to you, Lynn.
Okay, well, that actually wraps up our second quarter financial report. Unless there's questions.
Seems all is clear and is kind of as expected. You know, the one thing that we'll talk about in the next agenda item is, you know, our budgeted plan to draw down that contingency for it. And I think, you know, it's a good segue to Jeff and talking about our next agenda item, which I'll get back to here. So
Is that about the establishment of the new
the
fund?
3-year
Yeah,
forecast?
Yeah, actually, but before we jump to the next budget item, just related to the current fiscal year, Lynn and I had mentioned, I think in our meeting in November, that we were likely to come back to the committee and then eventually the board for a budget amendment this year. We at this point do not anticipate needing to do that. One of the main drivers was the receipt of a federal grant, which to help update the monitoring station in Lacey. We're actually don't expect to receive that until next fiscal year. And so we will not need to do that. So we'll not need a budget amendment this fiscal year, as far as we know.
We anticipate it's an $80,000 IRA grant, Inflation Reduction Act, that we are receiving from the Department of Ecology.
Good.
And we were a co-applicant to EPA for these funds, and it's great that they gave us an opportunity and asked us, as they did with all the other sister air agencies, what are the needs out there, and perfect timing.
Yeah, and you'll hear more from Odell during our board meeting during the monitoring.
Great. And we probably have new board members this week. Is that accurate?
Well, Jill, so again, I'll talk about this, so Jill has rotated off. We have not yet heard from Grays Harbor County who the next ORCAA board representative is going to be. So, and again, we are still early January. So, I checked their website yesterday. They still have their old county commissioners listed. So, but if we don't hear in the next week or two, we'll certainly be reaching out to find out who our new board member is, and we're working to get her or him onboarded, and hopefully in time for the February meeting.
Okay, I was just wondering how granular to get in the finance report for the general meeting, so I'll keep it fairly high level. Okay, ready to move on to the 3-year forecast?
Sure. So again, so during our last meeting, we talked about, again, we've talked at a number of meetings about setting up about penalties and settlement contingency funds to provide more transparency and be more intentional about how we're using these funds, particularly when we receive large sums like we did last fiscal year, where, as Lynn mentioned, as I'm sure you remember, towards the end of last fiscal year, we received over $1.9 million for a particular settlement. So and near the end of the last meeting, Jim asked Lynn to prepare a new 3-year forecast showing what that looks like. If we basically pull out that $1.9 million and set up essentially a separate contingency fund. So Dan, if you could share that document, please. So, and please make it bigger. And so what's at the top here is what you've seen before. Again, this is the three-year budget forecast. Can you make it a little bit bigger still? Okay. So, and again, you see there at the bottom, the ending undesignated fund balance, again, as we've talked about, for the current fiscal year ends at $3 million. But then by the end of fiscal year 28 is down to about $500,000. But so then, all right, scroll down, Dan. And then if you look at, so what you see here is near the bottom, so Lynn has essentially pulled out that $1.9 million into a separate penalty settlement fund. And unsurprisingly, I mean, as we would expect, I mean, basically you're pulling that out and separating it, then the undesignated fund balance goes down by that $1.9 million. And so, and Jim, that was your point, I think, at the end of our meeting.
We've already grown that. Yeah.
Yes. And so in my mind, so again, Lynn and I have had lots of conversations about this since our November meeting. And I think what this points out, pretty clearly is that we've got a budget issue. I wouldn't say long-term because, frankly, fiscal year 2028, that's not all that far out. But this is a budget issue that we need to solve. And essentially, I mean, our expenses are growing faster than our revenues. And so I think this is where we need to be putting our attention and our focus, rather than how are we, whether we're creating a separate fund. I mean, the finance committee, the board has oversight over how the agency is spending these funds. And so we're certainly not going to spend any of this $1.9 million without your approval and guidance. And so rather than bring back another resolution, I thought, well, actually the better conversation would be about this sort of longer term budget issue and what are we going to be doing? What are we doing as an agency to address this? Again, the sources of the funding imbalance, again, as we've talked a little bit about, but of course with our agency, payroll and benefits is roughly 85% of our expenses. Those are going up at roughly 6%, 7% a year. And then other expenses are going up as well. Whereas our revenues are not going up as fast. I mean, we've got, we've got the resolutions that say that our fees and our assessments go up at, we have a discussion every year during the budget process about roughly what CPI. CPI has been roughly 3%. Of course, a number of years ago, it was significantly higher, but we went up, I think 4% is what we increased rather than the full CPI. So essentially our expenses are going up faster than our revenues. And then we've also got, we've got unfunded and underfunded programs, outdoor burning. We've had conversations about that. That's an expense of roughly $300,000 a year that we don't have direct funding for. I mean, we use our assessments for that. We use some of our program funding for that. Similarly, so I would say monitoring is not an unfunded program, it's more an underfunded program. Where we do get some money from the state and from EPA to pay for that, but not all of it. Again, those grants have remained pretty much flat for 20 years. And so again, it pays for less and less of a percentage of the work being done. And frankly, our fee programs are paying for less and less because while we're increasing our fees by, say, past year was 3%, our costs of operating the programs are going up faster than that. And so in my mind, this points to, I think there's some steps that we need to take, and I have been talking to the management team here about looking at our our non-Title V fees. Of course, our Title V is required by RCW and WAC and federal regulations to pay for itself every year. So that's kind of a separate thing. But I think we really need to be looking, and I'm talking with Mike and others about the new source review, the notice of construction program, where the fees are currently paying for less than 50% of that program. And so that needs to be a top priority. But similarly, we need to look at registration program, asbestos program, just what do we need to do to ensure that our fees are covering the costs of operating these programs. Yeah, we've also talked about looking for revenue for outdoor burning programs. You know, do we, so, and that's a long, I know that most of these things are long, detailed conversations that we'll probably need to have at some point, but these are the kinds of things that I think that I and the staff need to be looking at, and then working with Finance Committee and the board on getting our revenue and expenses more in line over time. And so in my mind, again, pulling the 1.9 million, I mean, nice, and I want to make sure that the agency uses it in a way that furthers our mission, and yeah. So anyway, that's where I am. Just wanted to tee this up. So I had a brief conversation with Greg about this issue last week, and just again wanted to tee this up for the committee. See if you had any kind of next steps or suggestions for what you would like to see Lynn and I and the rest of the agency do with this.
And let's see, this is really a time, I see Randy's already unmuted, and I'm sure has something to contribute. I want to do my own little tee up too. I've been thinking a lot about this, and as Jeff said, had a little conversation with him, you know, and I think kind of to Jim's point, we've, you know, our budget is certainly where the rubber meets the road, right? And we all know that we were drawing down our contingency funds this year, and we've got some strategic investments and technology and a real staff churn that we have to process and deal with that kind of inflation. So kind of, I think, Jeff, and correct me if I'm wrong, but you're suggesting sort of tabling that conversation of creating a separate fund, since the budget document, as Jim said, is also the will of the board and our most important document. So I guess with that, turn it over to Randy and Jim, and open conversation here about how we should approach this. I mean, there's, you know, Jeff's already talked about looking at cost-cutting measures and, you know, making right-sizing fees and stuff, but what are your thoughts seeing these stark numbers if we do separate the fees, the large fees, out of our general contingency funds?
And if I could ask, unless somebody wants to look at this document, if I could ask Dan to quit sharing so that we can see each other better.
That's better.
Great. Okay, thanks.
Go ahead,
Jazz
Randy,
hands.
Randy, then Jim.
Okay, what you just showed us is a perfect reason why we have to separate it out. Now, we all think we know the numbers. We all think we're good at this, but until you see the stark reality of what's really happening, you won't know. When you see that we are actually on a collision course for the end, when you separate it out, then we have to work within those realms each year as we set up our budget. Yes, we may decide to take a little bit out of that, but at least we're not relying on it. The way it was set up right now, with it in there, you have a bow wave that's going to crush this organization or force huge increases over the next few years, because at the end of that 2028, it's going to fall completely apart. I myself, I can't stress enough, as somebody that has been through so many of these different cycles, there are times where you have to look at pulling in the skirts, cutting back. You cannot continue to expand a program. You have to cut programs. You can't just expect to increase fees and then increase burden on everybody else, because some of the times, I hate to say it, sometimes we are forced to do more with less. Sometimes we're forced to have less employees. I know nobody wants to hear that, but that's the reality. Other than that, you continue to blow it out to where they're going to be expected to pay for it. There's going to be a pushback at some point. One county leaves, one county pushes back, does something else, because they're not going to take it, and they're going to feel like they're being abused. when we go and we do our wage increases, this is a perfect example of those conversations we had in the past. When we go so high compared to what we do at the county level, eventually that'll catch up, because then they say to themselves, when we're at this cliff part, look what they've been doing. They've been just using the money a lot more liberal than what we do in our own county. Why would we contribute more? And we're going to be faced with a big cliff. I like the idea of separating it out, so it forces us to work with it every year and decide if we're going to take it, and decide if we're going to say, okay, by taking that though, that means that we got to fix that for next year, or we're going to have to take more next year. It's just how I've always budgeted, and I've been very successful at it. Funny enough, I'm facing the same thing right now in Mason County. My commissioners, because I put so much money aside and we did so well, last 2 years, my commissioners said, we got to expand, we got to do all these things. We're growing. I dig all that. But now all of a sudden this year, for the first time, they're looking at going backwards. It says on our budget 12 million. The actual amount will be 7 million. That's not the worst part. The worst part is if it goes to 7 million, the next year it'll be a $10 million bow wave. That's when it starts beating into to what we have for our true reserves. It's things like that that I worry about, and that's why having it so transparent. And you got to put money aside in order to be able to keep everybody aware of it. As soon as it becomes part of the whole pot, everybody spends it.
Okay, thanks, Randy. I just want to ask one clarifying question. I mean, doesn't the same conversation happen? I mean, cognizant that we're drawing down those general contingency funds. I guess you're saying I just want to understand your point fundamentally and really explicitly. If we put those, over and above the windfall from the fines, then we have to make an action to draw it down. But is that any different than as we contemplate a budget, knowing that we're drawing down that contingency?
Absolutely, because the people that are working on that budget, especially the large numbers we have, will not see it. They don't recognize it. That paper right there, and I do my numbers and I can see it. And even I am a little bit set back when I look at the numbers, and it's that obvious now because it's separated. I am so thankful that it was asked to be done that way, because what I thought was happening was just clarified in my mind 10 times over. It is worse than I was thinking, to be honest with you. But that's a transparency issue that I hadn't even thought of it in that manner, but I sure look at it that way now.
Thanks. Jim.
Okay. I hope you know where you are, Greg. So I really appreciate this. It's what I kind of was thinking. I do want to say, I've been on this board, this is my 14th year, and I think at least the last 10 years, we've been sitting on the same $1 million, even though since we created the first 3 or 5 year forecast, we were showing that it was gonna go away. So I think that just having a bottom line that's like that forces the board of directors and the staff to do what Randy is saying. So I agree with Randy about the philosophy, but I just have a difference of opinion about how to park it. I do think that, one question that came up for me, Jeff, is I think we've been kicking the can, my words, on a fee assessment and recalibration for a year or two, and maybe more. And really that needs to be our first priority so we can see the dollars and cents. I feel I'm going to make a comment here, but I want to park it that I don't believe there's always room for more efficiency too.
Yes.
But I believe that the expansions we've made for this organization are strategic, and they are places that we've been behind, that we've underinvested in our asset as a board. And so that I think that bow wave is largely necessary. And so it's important for us to figure out how to fund it long term. And this picture helps with that. Within reason, to Randy's point, there's often places that you can still tighten your belt.
Absolutely.
And some of the things we've been doing might be episodic efficiencies because we were so far behind, and now we have a new public record system, or when we get the new database, theoretically you think those are going to save you staff time, and really they might just save us the increase in cost and staff time, right? Over a short period. So the question I was going to ask you, the long way around the barn to that is, would it help you if we used a small amount of money to bring in a resource to help us with those fee assessments and evaluations so that we can get them done more quickly?
That's a good question. I mean, this is something that I've talked a lot with Mike Schultz about, again, in Mike's new role of compliance manager. I mean, this is very much in his on his mind, and he's been working with Jennifer DeMay, the engineering manager, specifically talking about the NOC fees. That's in term, but it's so. But there have been other things that have come up that have, I think, pulled Mike away from that a bit. But and I don't think we'll have information and we'll be able to do this in time for our fiscal year 2026 budget. Because again, we're putting that together now, and that's coming together pretty quick. But let me explore the idea of, again, the idea of pulling in a consultant or somebody to help with do a fee analysis. I know in conversations with other local air agencies. So for instance, I know Spokane Region Clean Air Agency has just done a look at their registration program and updated their fees. Similarly, Southwest. So, and again, anytime you work with a consultant, you have to wonder, so how much time to bring them up to speed? And is there really efficiencies there, or would it be better just is there other work that we can set aside in-house? So, but I appreciate you bringing it up, so we'll look carefully at that.
Yeah, so I think that, to me, then we need to make sure it's a board priority that it gets done in our next fiscal year, maybe preferably in the first half, so it can drive the following fiscal year budget, and then we can make really informed decisions about, how much is too much for our customers, to bear, and not, because I think that we have a little dial where we could actually hinder development and construction across the region too, if we weren't eyes wide open about that process. So so I appreciate that answer. And then I guess I'm still inclined to keep it at contingency, but if you two really want to create this or some set aside, I've been thinking about it, and I would want to call it something like a board strategic reserve, so that it's really clear that it's a strategy pot of money for enhanced strategy, and then look at reducing it to $500,000 or $750,000, so that it's something for strategic investments. And I feel like that gets it right within $1 million or 750 where the shortfall would be, which to me feels pretty comfortable for where we've been in my history. But that's only if both of you want to create the fund. I just want to make sure that was clear.
Go ahead, Randy.
So I still disagree with that. That's nothing more than just changing around the words. The whole idea is to take these fines and stuff that come in, keep them separate, so we're paying attention that we're not basing our budget off of the fines that we hope to get for the next years, and then hopefully we have to have more fines. That's one of the main things behind it. I definitely also want to clarify that I do not think in all the years that I've been here that we did ever were wasteful. That's one of the reasons why I always nominate him for chair again, to be honest with you, because I know that even if we disagree, when it comes down to it, he is definitely not a wasteful man. And everything that we've done in the past and we've put together were needed, but it doesn't matter if we can justify it sometimes. We have a limit on what we have for revenue. We have a limit on what we have for the ability to expend. As was explained to us, if we're looking at 4% revenue coming in, but a 7% increase, it's our job each year to look at that and to make sure that we don't expend that revenue, even if we need it or can justify it, because the reality is this is the money we have. When we start utilizing our fines to do that and not break it out specifically, then it literally becomes dangerous, because you need those fines in order to operate, and that's not where I want to be. And we've never had that here. We've never had a situation where I felt like we ever were pushing that. And I just want to make sure that we stay in that situation where we never do. As you know, or he knows, when I first came in, I thought I was going to go to war with this organization. I had heard all these different things. I come in, then I meet Jim and stuff like that. And the next thing I know, yes, he's liberal, but he's not liberal with his money. He's very, very realistic on what he wanted to do and what kind of burden he wanted to put on people. I'm just asking that we continue to do this, because this way, everybody else in that room that are brand new, that doesn't understand it, that way that was designed is so clear. I was so proud to see that. I always loved the way she puts her numbers together anyway. We all know that. I just appreciate that more than anybody can imagine. But again, I just want to make it clear, we have to keep within those increases of expenditures with our revenues. This will force us to do it when we openly will know that we're taking money out of fines in order to pay for something. We know we have to address it the next year. But if you change it to different names and stuff like that, it's no different than what we have now. It becomes part of the whole soup, and people can't separate that soup out. I really have learned that in all budgets I've been working on all these years, they can't. No matter how smart they are, or no matter how smart we think they are, some people see the numbers, some people don't.
Thanks, Randy. Jeff?
Just wanted to say, I mean, so actually the agency has used penalty and settlement funds to fund our operating budget for going back, yeah, so the question is, how much of that are we using for operating? Because of course it costs money to operate our penalty program, to issue NOVs and things, and that varies by program. And so really the question is, in my mind, is, you know, how much are we setting aside each year? I mean, again, historically, over the past 3 or 4 years, it's been $55,000. It bumped up to $75,000 one year. I think in the current fiscal year, we've got $150,000 from penalties and settlement funds going to support our operating funds. But so in my mind, but yeah, so again, what Lynn did is she just pulled out that $1.9 million. And so, so we could set that aside in a separate fund. And then again, and then perhaps the board could have a conversation about, well, we will be having a conversation about what do we do with that fund going forward.
Can I add just,
Please.
you know, we've shared with y'all the ORCAA revenue from, you know, the past 10 years. And Jeff just mentioned what the average was in the last few years. In the last 11 years, ORCAA has received $107,000 on average, 11 years, last 11 years. That $107,000 by no means covers the staff time of issuing those penalties. And I mean, we could almost have a separate program column just showing penalty, admin time, compliance time, engineering time, which would far exceed the $107,000 average. I just wanted, that was one point I wanted to make. And two, it's important that following GASB, the General Accounting Standards Board, you don't set aside funds just to set aside funds. You need to earmark specific reasons why you're doing that. Just so it's really important that we consider that when you're looking at creating a policy and follow the policy. I mean, you want to have something. This is an unusual circumstance that we faced last year. We've just never had this before. It's a good thing. We want to educate, and staff do a fab job on that, but it definitely takes time. And we do have a lot of unfunded programs, as Jeff mentioned, and under that are money that we're allowed to use. This still doesn't cover that. So the analysis that was talked about, there are definitely some projects that need to be looked at, prioritized, and brought back to the board to show what our attempts have been and what we've accomplished and what we feel staff's recommending, and hear us out. But I just wanted to make those comments. But more importantly, I think the last 11 years, we've received $107,000 on average. And that includes the 1.9 million. So I rest.
Okay. Randy, I saw your hand up, but let me
Yeah.
weigh in a little bit and then I'll pass it back to you. You know, I think both of you are much more passionate about this particular decision that we're not really making an action on right now, but I agree. It was really interesting to see the 2-3 year projections beside. I really take Lynn's point, and you know, I think it's really important we don't start budgeting, you know, $1 million in revenue for fines, but we never have, right? I think it was 150 this year for budgeting. I think creating that separate fund, as Lynn says, you don't it's unusual to have a fund that's just the input and not an output design into it. So, I mean, right now I'm more inclined with Jim's point of view that we need to be really cognizant that we don't draw this money down, our unrestricted contingency funds down too much. And I think this is exercise to break out extra funds is important, but I agree with both of you that the strategic investments we've made the last year are overdue and well-founded, that we should look at assessments and everything. But it seems like because one time we had a $1.9 million fine, and I think there was another $200,000 fine, beyond, but
Mhm.
that alone doesn't, to me, create a need for a separate fund. It just kind of wallpapers over some of the fiscal cliff that we're always headed for. And, almost every organization that I'm part of, if if we don't change anything and we just keep growing like this, then we're going to be out of money in 5 years. And almost everyone has always been there, and you adjust every year to make sure to tighten the belt a little bit this year rather than having to, cinch the belt in 3 years. So I guess I'm not moved to join you in this idea, Randy, now, though I think because of the kind of extraordinary fine that we had, I was deceived as well, is I guess what I want to acknowledge, and that we should just be very conscious of this. But I think it's in the right place right now, and we need to work to make our organization, sustainable, of course, as we move forward. But I don't agree with that priority, I guess, right now. But I'll stop there and pass it over to you, Randy.
I will tell you, you don't see it today, but you're wrong. You really are, and you'll find it out, or the rest of us will find it out in short term, because that's how it works. I'm not saying that we have to set up an account that all fines go into something. That's not what I'm saying. Take this, put it out separately. And yes, you can put it out separately. I've been doing it for the 13 years that I've been here. The 6 years I was also a port commissioner. You can, for example, I took road funds money when I could see that they had the access and the ability to do it. I put it out for new roads for economic development. Now it can be used for anything else in the future, but that's what it's set aside as. I've got other funds that I set aside here for IT, or there's no problem with doing that. The idea is taking that one fund, the one that we're looking at here, separating it out, because you saw it yourself. You didn't know, and you're a smart man. But when you saw that, you knew. Everybody needs to see that each year, because if they don't, they're going to get to the end of that, and there's going to be a cliff they're going to fall off of. And that's where I'm going to be sitting there, not saying I told you so, because I don't do that when it happens. If you've ever noticed that, I just deal with it at the time. But I'm telling you now, if we're not smart with this now, we will pay for it in a few years. When that cliff comes, the people that aren't here now, or that are here that won't be here then, will all be going, what the heck just happened? And it doesn't have to be that way. Just by separating this one amount out, as done this way, we'll decide each year how much of it to dip into in order to make things work. And with that, we'll be forced to have to address that we're running backwards each year. And again, if we don't, we won't.
Let me ask you another question, Randy. So let's say that this $1.9 million didn't exist. So when we were doing the budget process last year, we would have seen that cliff more clearly, right?
Yes.
Would you have made the same choices about the budget? Do you think the investments that we needed to make needed to be made?
You got to remember, I did not agree with some of our choices, but yes, you win some, you lose some. So although I disagreed, if you remember in those meetings, when it was over, we're a team. We stick together, and I try my best. I'm still human, and I'm an asshole sometimes, but I try my best to stay with the team no matter what, even when I lose. So I would have made other choices, but at the same time we didn't. And I don't think we did bad. I just know that we still have to do better this year. Everything we did last year or the year before to expand it, eventually we will have to either pay for it by bringing in more revenue, or we're gonna have to pay for it by making the cuts. And when the time comes, I'm afraid that the cuts are gonna be bigger than we think.
Well, I will say I'm glad you're still on the board. I really appreciate you know, the conversation and the perspective. So I'm not, I do appreciate it.
Thank you.
Jim?
Yeah, just really quick. I think one thing that came up in Randy's response for me is, you know, when we look at our fees and assessments, let's also look at all of our contingencies and step back from them. And maybe that whole budget sustainability and contingency conversation is actually a board conversation that's part of the strategic planning process.
Yes,
Because this is the most robust conversation I've had about anything at ORCAA in 14 years. Like literally. And I think that it's important that Greg frame the tension to the full board and that we bring the tension to the budget sustainability conversation and look at all of the contingencies and fees and everything of the organization as a whole.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was my comment.
I want to add one more thing, but not about this, but something that was said, that she said, we do need to keep track of how much the cost is to implement the fines and stuff. Because no matter what, at the end of the year, let's just say that we did do what I asked and we separated it out. We should be taking it out of that every year. If we know what that
The loss.
yeah, if we know what that amount is, we should be budgeting that in. Even if we set this completely aside, we should say, you know, this came out 50,000 backwards. We should take it out of the finding to cover it because we should be covering what it takes to do the work.
Is that possible then to budget expenditures for the fines?
Well, interesting, two things. One, a number of our programs allow for the administrative activity of pursuing an issuing violation. Enforcement. And then two, we have a line in our budget currently under program operations where we are pulling out our legal fees, attorney legal fees for the Friends of Grays Harbor that has sued.
well, that's challenging the Hoquiam Pelham Mill.
Correct, but however, we're using penalty funds
Yes.
to cover the legal expense for the legal cost. That wasn't part of our normal regular budget. So is that possible? I think that's a database question. How much can the database pull out? Compliance on each program, enforcement on each program, having to do with issuing NOVs. But a lot of our programs allow that to be covered as an expense. There are some that don't, which are unfunded.
Yeah, I mean, I think we need to look, I mean, our database, and we do in our timekeeping system, we do track by program and we track them by function within programs. And one of those functions is enforcement. And so we can certainly pull some of that data and look at what we could pull up and how we can separate. You know, there'll be some assumptions in there, and of course, and our data is not perfect, but we can take a look at that.
Well, and there's nothing wrong with the assumptions. The only reason why I knew you can do that already is because she said it. She was telling us that she knew that we were expending more than we were taking in. So it doesn't have to be it doesn't have to be exact. You just say, you know, council, this program that for the fines, we're running $60,000 backwards this year, and that should be compensated out of a fund like this. Just my 2 cents on that. I know I went on a third direction. Sorry about that.
That's okay. I think that's a really intriguing idea, though, to get both the revenue and expenditure line on that.
Yeah, I'm fascinated by that too. Like, I love that to be part of the full budget sustainability conversation. If we set aside anything over 110,000 in the future and then use it to fund the gap of enforcement, you know, and including wood smoke, then we have a funding source for wood smoke.
Right.
Right.
It really is part and parcel. Yeah.
Right.
Well, and that's a great decision the board makes, that they're using that 1 point such million to say, we're going to do this for the next 5 years, expectation that we're going to be taking 30,000 a year over the top of it. That's a great thing for the board to decide when you're keeping the funds separate, not just throwing it into the general. It's a great thing to decide on.
So I think we accepted your recommendation.
Yes.
Yes, I think so. Yeah. All right. Well, this has been a really, as Jim says, this is the most robust conversation I've had too, as part of the ORCAA board. And I think, that, it's not the end of the conversation. It's kind of the beginning of the conversation. So I appreciate it. And I'll try to, honor it. And please, guys, interject if I mischaracterize anything in the larger meeting. We're getting close to the meeting though. We've moved it forward 8:30 so we could get a little break, and then we're just gonna go right up until 10 o'clock again. I mean, given our druthers. But anything else for the good of the order today?
I need to know if the new commissioners are not going to be there. I'm supposed to be at an audit committee meeting, but I did not want to leave the new commissioners from Grace Harbor without the introduction and stuff like that. If they're not, then I'm going to probably attend that other meeting because it's really important. It's an audit committee, which saved us. I created that years ago and kept us from being, when I first came in, we were unauditable. We were one stage from unauditable. And I had to learn how to do that. That's why I created this committee and fought the sheriff, everything else. That's how bad it was when I came into this county. So when we have 29 million cash on hand in the general fund and such, you can understand how far we came. So I would love to attend that meeting if I could, but if the other commissioner is going to be there, they need to see us. I don't want to leave.
So,
Yes.
Randy, we know at least one commissioner is gonna be 30 minutes late. Can I get your number and I'll text you if we have a quorum issue? Cause we just need to do the consent agenda at the beginning.
Absolutely.
And we're done.
Yep,
Okay.
I can jump out and take care of. Actually, you know what? If you can do a lot of it in the 5-10 minutes, I'll be late for
Yeah,
that.
we'll get it done right at the beginning. Yeah,
And
I'll
then-
save
okay.
my director report for after the consent agenda.
Awesome. I'll
Okay.
stick around for you then.
Okay,
Jeff?
thank you.
So I just wanted to say before we close that in terms of compiling and putting together, and we are in the process of putting together our fiscal year 2026 budget. But because of how the board meeting days fall, there is less than 30 days between the May Finance Committee and board meeting and the June Finance Committee and board meetings. So I'm saying that we're gonna have to go out for public comment with our budget prior to the May Finance Committee meeting, which is usually when this committee finalizes
bother
the
me.
budget and talks to the board.
Mhm.
So we might need to meet in March, is what I'm saying. We're working to put the budget together in time so that we would have at least the bare bones of something to share with you, tee up any questions at a finance committee meeting in March, so that then that positions us better for then.
Jeff, I could
Yeah.
go either way, but I can tell you right now, I know how good we are with our numbers. As long as she's telling me she's sticking around long enough to put it together, then
I'm always free at this time.
yeah, then
So
I have no problem with the numbers getting out there early and then us cleaning up if we have to either. That's not a problem.
Yeah, so we'll send out a calendar invite for a March Finance Committee meeting. We'll again let you know we won't have one in February, but then we'll let you know again as our budget development process happens, kind of whether it's looking like we're gonna need that March meeting or not, but please hold the time in case we do need it. And again, and I'll be providing more information at our next meeting, but we will be transitioning in a new financial services manager. So I've hired somebody who's starting on February 3rd, but he'll be coming in kind of in the middle of this budget development process. So.
Cool.
So that means we're gonna have a March Finance Committee meeting and an April Finance Committee meeting.
Yes.
As Jeff indicated, a placeholder for March.
But maybe not May and June.
Well, I don't know. I can't answer
Probably,
that.
yeah. We'll see.
No, it's a great meeting. Yeah, more the merrier. So yeah, no, I've got March in my calendar. Okay, anything else for the good of the order?
When am I supposed to appoint members of this committee?
At the February meeting.
Okay, because we need Grace Harbor was the alternate, so,
Yeah,
okay,
right.
we'll do it next month. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, great. With that, we're adjourned. We'll see you at 10.